WomanVision TV. I'm your host, Nadia Jordana. My guest today is Ruth Bachman, author of Growing Through the Narrow Spots. She'll be sharing with us her inspirational story of how she navigated a terrifying and life-changing event with courage and intention. Let's talk to Ruth. Welcome to the show, Ruth. I'm glad you could be here today.
Thank you so much, Nadia. It's my pleasure.
Well, you have been making the rounds lately with your new book, Growing Through the Narrow Spots, and sharing your inspirational story. How and when did this journey begin, and how did it change the direction of your life?
Oh, that is a very good question. And it's actually been 10 years in terms of the real directional change. I was, a woman, wife, and mother, and a parent, good health, and I was doing all of those things that people do, including going to church regularly and practicing meditation and yoga. And then one day I noticed a soft, non-painful lump on the inside of my left wrist that I ignored for about 7 weeks, hoping that it would go away. And a dear friend encouraged me to seek a professional opinion, which I did, gratefully. And the diagnosis that came back to me was soft tissue sarcoma. And sarcoma was a word that I'd never heard before, but it is a rare form of cancer.
Okay.
So that dramatically changed my life, and it in a way brought it to a halt, like a screeching halt.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it was as if you go over this waterfall with the child's inner tube, and you're just scrambling with all of this new vocabulary and new experiences in life. And when I was faced with that diagnosis, I had said initially that I would do anything that the doctor asked me to do, but I was not going to have them take my hand.
That's natural.
Because it was my dominant left hand. I was left-handed before all of this started too. But ultimately, when the choice was, are you going to lose your left hand or are you going to lose your life? I decided that I would choose life.
Yeah.
And that's been a dramatic change.
That really has been a journey. I was reading in your book, and there was a passage in here that I want to share with your viewers. I found it particularly meaningful and poetic. We give and accept answers too quickly. Seek to take away emotional pain too easily. And too often distract ourselves with busyness, often before we learn what the narrow spots has to teach us. We must learn how to rest at the bottom of the hourglass without answers, without conclusions, and some days without meaning. Like I said, I found that particularly poetic and meaningful, and I'd like to hear some advice you have, because we all have days when there seems to be no answers and no meaning and no conclusions.
Well, I describe cancer as the narrow spot in an hourglass, and this is the metaphor that I use, and it kind of came to me 10 years ago, really, when this was happening, when people said, well, you're the same person, you're the same person. I said, of course I'm the same person. I just have gone through this narrow spot of cancer, and I'm the sand. I've traveled from the top through that tight spot to the bottom, the same sand, but with a different arrangement, obviously. And in going through that change in who I was, it would have been an easy time in my life to say, why me? Why has this happened to me? What does this mean? What? And what I had learned 12 years earlier, when my sister Kristen was diagnosed with malignant melanoma, that ultimately took her life.
Yeah, we've had a whole nother journey with that.
That was a good teacher. That journey was a very good teacher. Because what I learned was that sometimes you simply have to live with the questions. There are so many things that happen in life. And that asking why me, or asking how did this happen, or wanting to have that understanding is almost futile in a way, almost a waste of effort and time in a way. Much better to look at whatever it is that happens in life and say, yes, this has happened, and now what? Because with any loss, whether it is your hand or a person or a job or, a change in financial situation, whatever. All of that represents loss, and it requires grieving. And the three questions that are important, I think, for going through any grieving journey are: what is truly lost, what remains, and what is possible. In the case of my cancer, I lost my dominant left hand. That was significant. But the rest of me was still here. And I am a strong, determined woman, and I certainly asked for help, got a lot of help, but I understood wholeheartedly that there would be really nothing that I would not be able to accomplish with the right amount of patience and persistence and grace.
That's really good. And you've made your way through this with some, I think, interesting and fun ways of dealing with this. I loved the story of how you named your tumor Goliath and why. Tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Well, I had this large group of people that were my followers in a way, and so I would email them on a regular basis and let them know what was going on with me, and so I thought, gosh, what can I do in order to keep this kind of interesting? So I thought, well, I'll have a Name That Tumor contest. Now, I know that this was not an original idea, but I don't know that I had heard of anyone else who had done it before. And so I got 34 responses from around the world, and some of them were very interesting. And then I looked at all of the answers, and the one that won was Goliath. And the thing that rang so true with that name is that Goliath was this seemingly undefeatable foe that was defeated by a neophyte who trusted in God. And because my faith has always been an important part of my journey, it just made all the sense in the world. And it certainly entertained my followers, if you will, my support group, to know that they were a part of this process.
I loved it, and that's part of the reason I love that story. And among other things, you stress that you need to maintain a sense of humor, which you did there, and also a feeling of gratitude. And when things were looming large, how did you manage to do that?
I think the humor piece of it was simply a desire to not only be focused on what was going wrong. Yeah. And really, there were some really funny things that happened in the process.
And laughter is a good medicine.
It is. It's sometimes it's the best medicine. I had a dear friend who sent me an email, and he is a dear friend, and so he knew that I would understand his humor. And he pointed out some potentially positive things about one-handedness, including the fact that I can seek out half-price manicures. I can. It's not so easy, but you can. I at least get a discount. I only have half as many age spots as other women my age, which is a real positive. And then the next one was that I will never again lose a pair of gloves.
That's right.
And so, reading other people's sense of humor about what it was that was going on in my life really helped me to kind of keep it in perspective.
I like that. Well, and then at another point in the book I read, and I can't tell you right now if this was a quote from you or if it was a quote from someone else, you can clarify that. But I read, we do not need to wait for sickness in order to seek wellness. And I thought that was one of the most powerful things I had read recently.
And it's so true. And it is something that has come to me. I think certainly my vocabulary in terms of telling my story has improved perhaps and gotten greater based on all of the things that I have read and all of the people that I have talked to along this journey in the last 10 years. But when I think about well-being, when I think about health, which is basically the root definition of the word health is really whole, to be whole. And I know that I have a gaping hole in my silhouette, and sometimes I look at my shadow on the sidewalk and I think, my God, I only have one hand. But I am whole. I am me. The sand here in the hourglass is still all there. It has a new arrangement. And I think sometimes if things happen in our lives, we tend to think that we can stick our heads in the sand and pretend that nothing has happened. And if we're able to rest and kind of determine what our new arrangement is, then I think we can move forward. And it's the moving forward that's always, always, always the goal. And that's well-being. Well-being is understanding that you are a whole person and that your body, mind, and spirit come to play in creating that wholeness.
Well, and that's the resting at the bottom of the hourglass, isn't it?
It is.
I like that.
It is.
And your faith played a big role. Talk a little bit more about that.
My faith is very important to me. I am a woman of faith. I describe myself as that, a child of God. I choose to express that faith in the Lutheran tradition, but I like to think that I have a very broad perspective on what my faith means to me. I know that my faith has never provided me the opportunity to have any exclusion from experiencing narrow spots in my life, but what my faith does is it provides a cushion at the bottom of the hourglass. It's like this cushion that as my sand is falling through, I know that my faith is there, that the grace of God is there, and supporting me, not preventing me from going through, but allowing me in a way to not go kicking and screaming, that I really have the opportunity to go through with grace and then find out what that narrow spot has to teach me.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And I'm delighted you could be here today, Ruth Bachman. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we end this segment? Because after that, then we're going to go visit you live at one of your talks.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to tell the audience about the Hourglass Fund project. When I decided that I was going to tell my story and take it public and go large, I decided that I would give it all away. And someone said, "What if someone wants to pay you?" And so I thought, well, it'll have to go to cancer research and education and advocacy. And so that's what I did. I began a fund at the University of Minnesota called the Hourglass Fund, and now I have expanded that to a couple of other partners. And any monies that come my way, either through speaking honorariums or the proceeds from the book, all go into that fund. And I've sponsored a couple of small research projects at the University of Minnesota, of which I am very privileged and pleased to have that role. And then I also work with Rain and Sarcoma, an organization that supports sarcoma patients and their families and loved ones, and the Angel Foundation, which provides financial support for adults who are experiencing cancer, and then Above and Beyond Cancer. That's a whole nother program to talk about this wonderful experience that I had going on a trek to Nepal last September. It was remarkable. And so Above and Beyond Cancer is another one of my partners. But all of it is intended to be a part of that gratitude, a part of that giving back for the excellent and wonderful care that I received and the support that I received from people that I know and love.
Oh, great. Thanks. Well, we'll talk again.
Thank you.
What's going to happen if I don't accept amputation? The smile gone from his eyes, he answered, "You will die." He urged me to accept the unimaginable, to choose life without my dominant left hand and forearm. I knew that if I made that choice, I would accept something that was life-altering, disfiguring, potentially life-saving, but with no lifetime guarantee. I asked, if I were your wife or mother, what would you like me to do? And he said, the difficult thing. And I made my choice. Accepting the reality of amputation meant that I needed to reframe my life the way that I knew it. I needed to change my perspective. So I want you to go through a little perspective changing experience with me. It's really very easy. Watch, and this is all you need to do. It's all you need to do, but I want you to do it with me, okay? Bring your finger up here by your head, point it at the ceiling, all right? Now, look at the tip of your finger and draw a circle on the ceiling in a clockwise direction. Now, bring that circle down in front of your nose. Don't make it smaller, don't make it larger. Just bring the circle down, bring your finger down. Bring the circle down in front of your heart. Tell me what's happened to the circle. You have to say it loud enough for me to hear. Not smaller, not bigger. No, that's the answer. Up here, it started clockwise. And then you bring it down, looking at it down here, it's going counterclockwise. A change in perspective means looking at the same thing from a different angle in order to create a different experience. Changing my perspective, moving from my head and sinking into my heart allowed me to say yes to a very difficult thing. While my mind was racing with questions, my heart knew that somehow, just as I had done so many other times in my life when faced with a challenging life change, my heart knew that I would move forward. And now, 10 years later, I know cancer to be a very powerful and proficient teacher with the potential for profound transformation.
Before we end today's show, I'd like you to take a moment and think about your own life and some of the unexpected events that have molded it. Would you have, or could you have, ever imagined some of the twists and turns that transpired?